80%? I heard the number and I thought he was reading the wrong document. I looked at Nathan. He didn't even blink, and I realized he already knew. He'd known before Dad was even gone.
For 12 years, Claire Whitmore put her entire life on hold. She fed her father, bathed him, drove him to every appointment, held his hand through the worst nights of his life. Her brother Nathan called once a month. When Richard Whitmore died at 81, his will gave Nathan 80% of everything. This is the story of the sister who stayed, the brother who left, and the document that destroyed what was left of their family. The Whitmores were never wealthy. Richard was a carpenter, Elaine was a school secretary, but Richard built their house himself. Every beam, every wall, every door frame. It wasn't just a house, it was 40 years of his life in wood and stone. In Plain 11, Elaine Whitmore was diagnosed with pancreatic cancer. She died 4 months later. Claire was 32. Nathan was 28.
Someone had to stay. Dad couldn't cook, he could barely do laundry. Nathan was already in Chicago, building his career. I was teaching third grade 20 minutes from the house, so I moved back in. It was supposed to be 6 months.
I was 28, I'd just been promoted. I had a lease in Chicago, a team that depended on me. What was I supposed to do, quit everything and move back to take care of Dad? Claire offered. She said she wanted to. I took her at her word.
The first 2 years were manageable. Richard was independent enough. Claire cooked, cleaned, handled the bills. She and her father watched old westerns on Friday nights. She still saw friends, she still dated, she still felt like herself.
There were good days. Dad would tell me about building the house, how he'd carry the lumber himself because he couldn't afford help. He'd say, "This house was built with these hands, Claire. I think that's why I stayed." Not just for him, for what the house meant.
I flew home for Thanksgiving and Christmas. Every year, Dad was always happy to see me. We'd talk about the bears, about the market, about nothing important. It was enough, at least I thought it was.
But 6 months became a year became 3, 3 became 6. Claire stopped teaching. She told herself it was temporary. Every year was going to be the last one.
It was supposed to be 6 months. That's what I told my friends, my principal, my boyfriend at the time. 6 months, that was 11.5 years ago.
I always assumed Claire was okay with it. She never complained, she never asked me to come back, she never asked for help, and I never offered. I think that's what guilt sounds like when it's quiet.
My friends stopped inviting me out, not because they were mean, because I always said no. After a while, people stopped asking. My world got smaller every year, and I let it.
Nobody signed anything. Nobody sat down and said Claire takes care of Dad, and in return she gets the house. It didn't need to be said, or so Claire believed.
The first time I walked into that house, I could see it. Claire was exhausted. But she wasn't just tired from the work. She was tired from being invisible. 12 years of waking up at 3 a.m., of cleaning, of giving everything, and nobody outside that house had any idea what it cost her.
By 2018, Richard's memory had started to slip, small things at first. Forgetting names, repeating stories, then bigger things. Leaving the stove on, getting lost in the neighborhood he'd lived in for 40 years. Claire became not just his daughter, but his nurse, his cook, his memory.
My friends stopped calling, not because they were cruel, because I never had time to call back. I hadn't been on a date in 4 years. I hadn't left the state in 6. My world became that house, those 4 walls, and my father's face looking at me like he wasn't sure who I was anymore.
I started sending $500 a month. I know it's not a fortune, but I was helping the way I could. Claire never asked for money. She never asked for anything, actually, which made me think she was fine.
$500 a month. That's what 12 years of my life was worth to him. He spent more than that on dinner in one weekend. But money was the only language Nathan spoke, so I guess that was his way of saying thanks for handling it.
Nathan's career took off. He bought a condo in downtown Chicago. He visited less, Christmas only, most years. The phone calls got shorter, 5 minutes on Sundays. How's Dad? Okay, talk soon. Click. In the spring of 2022, Nathan visited for Easter. He stayed for 2 days. On the second day, he said something that would change everything.
I suggested assisted living, not because I didn't appreciate what Claire was doing, but because it was killing her. I could see it. She was 44 and looked 55. I said, Claire, this isn't sustainable. There are places that can give Dad professional care. I meant it as compassion.
He said I was keeping Dad hostage. Those were his exact words. You're keeping him hostage because you have nothing else. I didn't speak to him for 3 months after that.
Was it harsh? Yes. Was it true? I think so. Claire didn't have a job, didn't have a partner, didn't have a plan. Taking care of Dad had become her entire identity. I was trying to help her see that.
They didn't speak for 3 months. When they did, it was surface level, polite, cold. The easy warmth of their early relationship was gone. Something had cracked, and neither knew how to fix it.
Didn't ask for gratitude. I just didn't expect to be punished for staying. The one time he visits, he tells me I'm the problem. Me. The one who was actually there.
By summer 2022, Richard could no longer dress himself. He called Claire by her mother's name most days. The house that he'd built with his own hands was now a place he couldn't navigate without help.
I was helping the only way I could. From a distance. I sent money. I called. I couldn't drop everything. That's not how life works. You don't stop your whole life because your father is getting old. Everybody's father gets old.
The gap between them had become a canyon. Claire and her shrinking world, Nathan and his expanding one. And between them, a father who couldn't remember which child had stayed and which had left. What Claire didn't know, what she wouldn't find out until the day she sat in that lawyer's office, is that 6 months before Richard died, Nathan flew home, not to visit his father, to visit his father's lawyer. And what happened in that meeting would erase 12 years of sacrifice in a single signature. October 2022. Nathan flies to his father's town alone. He doesn't tell Claire. He doesn't visit the house. He goes straight to Gerald Keating, the family's estate attorney, and requests a meeting with his father.
I went to see the lawyer because I was worried. Claire had complete control of Dad's life, his finances, his medical decisions, everything. I wanted to make sure his wishes were being respected. That's all.
I was in the kitchen when Nathan brought Richard back from that meeting. Richard was confused, agitated. He kept saying, "I signed it. I signed it." I asked Nathan what happened. He said, "Just some paperwork, Maggie. Nothing to worry about." But I saw Richard's face. That wasn't nothing.
According to court documents filed later, Nathan told his father that if Claire continued as sole caretaker, he would have to look into professional care options. Richard, who had spent his entire life in the house he built with his own hands, understood exactly what that meant. The new will was simple. Nathan Whitmore, 80%, Claire Whitmore, 20%. Gerald Keating later testified that Richard appeared oriented but anxious during the signing. He did not question whether Richard was under duress.
The last 6 months were the hardest. Dad barely recognized me some days. I'd sit with him for hours, just holding his hand. He'd squeeze it sometimes. I told myself that meant he knew I was there. Nathan called on Sundays. 5 minutes. "How's Dad?" "Okay, talk soon." Click.
Richard Whitmore died on March 14, 2023, at the age of 81. He died in the house he built, in the bed his daughter had made every morning for 12 years. Nathan arrived 2 days later.
Nathan cried at the funeral. Real tears, I think. But even then, even standing over our father's casket, I noticed he'd brought a folder. A folder to a funeral.
Three weeks later, Claire and Nathan sat in Gerald Keating's office. Claire expected a formality. She expected 50-50. What she got was a number that took 12 years of her life and reduced them to 20%.
"80%. I made him repeat it. I said there must be a mistake. He said, "This is the current will, signed October 2022. I looked at Nathan. He was looking straight ahead. He already knew.
I didn't enjoy that moment. I want that on the record. But Dad made his choice. He was lucid. He signed it. That's how the law works.
Claire called me that night. She could barely speak. She kept saying, "He changed it. He changed it 6 months ago." And I thought about that day in the kitchen, Richard saying, "I signed it. Now I knew what he signed."
I could have accepted it. 20% of 1.2 million is still $240,000. But it wasn't about money. It was about 12 years of my life being told they were worth less than his phone calls.
Claire hired an elder law attorney and filed a will contest, alleging undue influence. Nathan hired his own. The case dragged on for 18 months. The legal fees alone exceeded $180,000, split between both sides.
I offered her 40-60. More than the will said. More than fair, in my opinion. She said no. She said it wasn't about percentages. I still don't understand what she wanted.
The case turned on Margaret Torres' testimony, the home health aide who had been there for the last 3 years, who had seen Richard's face the day he came back from that meeting.
I told the court what I saw. Richard was scared that day. Nathan didn't threaten him directly. He didn't have to. All he had to say was professional care, and Richard understood. That house was his life. He would have signed anything to stay in it.
The court found evidence of undue influence. The will was partially invalidated. The final settlement, 55% Claire, 45% Nathan. But by then, the legal fees had consumed nearly $180,000, and the house, Richard's house, the one he built with his own hands, had to be sold to pay the debts. It sold for $700,000.
I won. That's what my lawyer said. But I lost the house. I lost my brother, I lost 12 years, and I lost my father twice. Once when he died, and once when I found out he signed that paper. What exactly did I win?
Nathan moved on. He never apologized. In a statement through his lawyer, he said, "My father made his decision freely. I respect the court's ruling, but I disagree with it. Claire and Nathan have not spoken since the settlement. That was 19 months ago."
I've worked in elder care for 15 years. I've seen this story play out more times than I can count. The child who stays, the child who leaves, and the document that decides who mattered more. Richard Whitmore didn't change his will because he loved Nathan more. He changed it because he was afraid. Afraid of the nursing home, afraid of losing the house he built. Nathan didn't hold a gun to his head. He held something worse. He held a future Richard couldn't face. But here's what nobody talks about. Claire stayed for 12 years. Was every one of those years pure selflessness? Or did staying become easier than figuring out what her own life was supposed to look like? Nathan left. Was that abandonment? Or was it the only honest thing either of them did? Richard built that house with his hands. He wanted it to mean something. In the end, it was sold to strangers, and the money went to lawyers. I don't think anyone in this story got what they deserved. Who failed Richard Whitmore? The daughter who gave everything, or the son who offered him a choice he couldn't refuse? Tell me in the comments.
Next week, on After the Will, a brother who didn't visit for 9 years. He missed the birthdays, the surgeries, the holidays. Then he showed up at the funeral with a lawyer and a claim to half of everything. His sister had one question: where were you?